Imagine opening a coffin that's been sealed for over 400 years. The smell hits you like a punch to the face. This actually happened when experts opened Queen Elizabeth I's tomb. What they found inside shocked everyone who was there. Opening a royal coffin is never taken lightly by historians. Think about cleaning out your grandparents' old attic after many years. You know there might be treasures inside, but you're also worried about what condition everything will be in. That's exactly how the experts felt about Elizabeth's tomb. The decision came in 1876 during restoration work at Westminster Abbey. Workers needed to move several royal coffins to make repairs. They had a rare chance to peek inside history itself. Queen Elizabeth. I had been buried in 1603. That's over 270 years of being sealed away from the world. Her coffin sat in the same spot, undisturbed and forgotten by most people. The Victorian era was obsessed with death and the afterlife. People were fascinated by mummies and ancient burials. So when the opportunity arose, officials couldn't resist taking a look inside. But this wasn't just about curiosity. They wanted to verify that Elizabeth's body was actually inside. Royal tombs had been robbed before throughout history. Some contained empty coffins or the wrong person entirely. The team included the Dean of Westminster and several other important officials. They approached the task with great respect and scientific interest. This wasn't grave robbing, it was historical research. They also hoped to learn more about Elizabeth's final years. The Queen had been very secretive about her health. She wore heavy makeup and wigs to hide her appearance. What did she really look like when she died? The decision was finally made on a cold December day. The workers carefully lifted the heavy stone slab covering her tomb. What they found beneath would be talked about for generations, but were they prepared for what lay waiting inside that ancient coffin? Would you have had the courage to look inside after so many centuries? The stench was unlike anything the witnesses had ever experienced before. Picture opening a container of food that's been forgotten in your fridge for months. The smell makes you gag immediately and step back. Now, multiply that by 100 years of decay. That's what hit those Victorian gentlemen. One witness described it as the most offensive odor imaginable. The smell was so powerful that several people had to leave the room immediately. Even the hardened workers who dealt with old graves every day were shocked. But what exactly causes this terrible smell after so many centuries? When a body decomposes, bacteria break down the tissues and organs. This process creates gases like hydrogen sulfide and methane. Think of rotten eggs mixed with sewage. Elizabeth's body had been embalmed before burial. The Tudors used special spices and chemicals to preserve royal corpses, but even the best embalming couldn't stop nature completely. After 270 years, the preservation methods had clearly failed. The coffin itself made things worse. It was made of lead, which doesn't let air in or out. This created a sealed environment where different types of decay could happen. The gases had nowhere to escape, building up over centuries. The witnesses also reported a thick, oily substance, uncovering everything inside. This was likely the remains of the embalming materials mixed with body fluids. It had turned into a disgusting black sludge over time. Some people fainted from the overwhelming smell. Others vomited right there in the abbey. Remember, these were tough Victorian men who weren't easily disturbed. The smell must have been truly horrific. The workers had to take frequent breaks to get fresh air outside. They tied cloths around their faces, but nothing seemed to help much. The stench seemed to stick to their clothes and follow them around. Can you imagine being trapped in a small space with that smell? How long do you think you could have lasted in that tomb? What they found inside the coffin was barely recognizable as human. Imagine finding an old Halloween costume in your basement after many years. The fabric has rotted, the colors have faded, and it's falling apart. Elizabeth's body looked somewhat like that, but much worse. The Queen's famous red hair was still there, but it had turned completely white. Strands of it fell apart when touched, crumbling like old paper. Her skull was visible through patches of remaining skin and tissue. Her elaborate burial dress had mostly rotted away. Only small pieces of fabric remained, stuck to what was left of her body. The rich silks and jewels mentioned in burial records were either gone or unrecognizable. Most shocking was the condition of her hands and face. Elizabeth had been famous for her pale, smooth skin in life. She spent hours each day applying makeup and cosmetics. But now her face was sunken and dark, with only bits of dried flesh clinging to bone. The embalming process had preserved some parts better than others. Her torso was in relatively good condition compared to her limbs, but even the best preserved areas looked nothing like the powerful queen from history paintings. One witness noted that her body had shrunk significantly. Elizabeth had been tall for a woman of her time, but decay had compressed everything, making her appear much smaller. The mighty queen who ruled England looked tiny and fragile. Perhaps most disturbing were her eyes. The eye sockets were empty, dark holes that seemed to stare at nothing. Remember, this was the woman who claimed she had the heart and stomach of a king. Now, she looked like any other ancient corpse. The investigators took careful notes about everything they saw. They measured and documented the remains for historical records. But many details were too gruesome to include in public reports. Would you have been able to look closely at such a sight? What do you think went through their minds seeing their legendary queen like this? The condition of Elizabeth's body taught historians important lessons about royal burial customs. Think about how we preserve food today, using refrigerators and freezers. The Tudors had their own methods for preserving bodies, but they weren't nearly as effective as they hoped. Royal embalming in the 1600s was a complex, expensive process. First, they removed the internal organs and placed them in separate containers. Then they filled the body cavity with spices, herbs, and preservatives. Finally, they wrapped everything in layers of cloth and cerecloth. Elizabeth's embalmers used the best materials available at the time. They imported expensive spices from distant countries. They used mercury, which they believed would prevent decay. They even added aromatic oils to mask any future smells. But the examination revealed that these methods had failed. The spices had turned into a rotting mess. The mercury had actually made the decay worse in some areas. The expensive treatments were basically useless after centuries. This discovery changed how historians understood Tudor burial practices. They realized that even royal preservation was more about ceremony than actual effectiveness. The elaborate processes were meant to honor the dead, not necessarily preserve them forever. The lead coffin was supposed to be the ultimate protection. Lead doesn't rust or break down like other metals. But it also trapped everything inside, creating perfect conditions for different types of decay. The very thing meant to preserve her had made things worse. Other royal tombs examined around the same time showed similar results. Henry VIII's remains were in equally poor condition. Even with unlimited resources, Tudor preservation methods simply didn't work long-term. This taught modern scientists valuable lessons about decomposition and preservation. They learned what works and what doesn't when it comes to stopping decay. These discoveries helped improve modern embalming and preservation techniques. What do you think future archaeologists will discover when they examine our modern burial methods? Will our techniques prove more effective than the Tudors' attempts? Opening. Elizabeth's coffin revealed the harsh reality behind royal death. The terrible smell, shocking decay, and failed preservation methods showed that even queens can't escape nature's power. This gruesome discovery taught historians valuable lessons about Tudor burial customs and the limits of ancient preservation techniques. Sometimes the most important historical lessons come from the most unpleasant discoveries. What other royal tombs do you think hide shocking secrets? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more historical mysteries.